Yes, graduates, welcome to Hard Talk Podcast with HTK. Fasten your seatbelts. Hey, users and subscribers, welcome back to another episode of Hard Talk with HTK. Listen, we are going to do some politics today. Listen, I could not believe when I observed the sitting of Parliament and Juliet Holness's reaction to Nikisha Burchell chatting Patwah in her speech at the opening of her speech, no less. Listen, but say, I laugh till I nearly pop up. So, as you know, the sitting of Parliament took place yesterday, and Juliet Holness, who is the Speaker of the House, took much objection to Nikisha Burchell starting off her maiden speech with Patwah. Her speech was about culture, and I think it is important that we understand the context within which Nikisha Burchell skillfully wove into her speech the local dialect. Listen for yourselves. I have taken out the best bits just for you to hear.
Okay, good. Okay.
You may begin.
Madam Speaker, me get up this afternoon to make my first sectoral speech for my portfolio.
Hold on. Standing orders. And I think you are fully aware. And if I have to stop you again during your presentation, you will not get any additional time. No, and she knows.
Broken English. It's English, broken.
Standing order 6, page 3.
When I speak to this,
Somebody make a full Spanish speech. This is a representation and culture. That's Spanish. That's
Madam Speaker, here allow me to speak. A leader. Madam Speaker, perhaps I should abandon that attempt to use our local language because I have been reminded of the linguistic conventions of this honorable house. Because maybe there is no more fitting way to begin a presentation on culture than to speak briefly in the language understood by the overwhelming majority of Jamaican people. Even if that language still struggles for full acceptance in some of our most formal national spaces, including this very Parliament. So let me give you the Queen's English. Let me give you the Queen's English. At the outset, permit me first to thank the leader of the opposition, the Most Honourable Mark Golding, for the confidence he has placed in me through this portfolio assignment. I also thank my parliamentary colleagues, my councillors, my constituency and personal team, and the many people who support the demanding work of representation and public service every single day. Parents, Miss Fae and Pastor Burchell, for instilling in me from very early a deep love for Jamaica, a deep respect for people, right here, and a deep pride in our culture, particularly through faith, religion, community, and service. Much of what I understand today about identity, resilience, storytelling, and the spirit of Jamaican people began long before politics. It began in church. It began in my community. It began in school. It began in my yard. And permit me especially to acknowledge the people of South St. James who traveled all the way from country to town to sit in this chamber today to hear their MP deliver her maiden sectoral presentation. From Anchovy to Catadupa, from Maroon Town to Welcome Hall, from Springfield to Mount Carey. Thank you for making the journey. Thank you for believing in me. people of South St. James are not merely observers of Jamaican culture. We are carriers of it. We're protectors of it, builders of it. And I want them to know that every single day I walk in this house, I never forget what it means to represent you. I never forget where I come from. And I will fight every single day for the people of South St. James and for the dignity, the potential and future of rural Jamaica. I'm a country girl. Before I proceed into the substance of this presentation, permit me briefly to make an observation about the structure of our sectoral debates themselves. It would perhaps be far more useful to the country if the sequencing of these presentations allowed the Jamaicans first to hear from the sitting portfolio minister, because the purpose of these debates should not merely be performance, political theater, or ritual. They should also function as developmental dialogue. And so in this instance, I speak before the country has yet heard from Minister Olivia Anti-Babsy Grange herself. But permit me nonetheless to acknowledge her long-standing commitment to this ministry and the energy she has invested over many years in Jamaica's cultural and entertainment sectors. Pick up yourself, Anti-Babsy. But in the absence of that sequencing, structure, I will use this opportunity not merely to critique, but to place on the table a broader national vision. Because culture, creativity, entertainment, and information cannot continue to exist at the margins of national development policy. They're not ornamental. They're not side conversations. They're not ceremonial add-ons. They are infrastructure, economic infrastructure, tourism infrastructure, employment, identity, digital infrastructure, soft power infrastructure, democratic infrastructure. And perhaps no country on earth proves that more clearly than Jamaica. Long before many countries knew our GDP, they knew our music. Before they knew our exports, they knew our athletes. Before they knew our population size, they knew our sound, our language, our creativity, our spirit. Jamaica is a cultural superpower with a developing economy. And that reality demands that we begin treating culture, creativity, and information not as peripheral concerns of government, but as strategic pillars of economic development and global influence. I'm going to speak to culture as infrastructure. For some people, culture is an event. For people like me, culture is how we survive. I come to this portfolio not only as a parliamentarian, but as a daughter of rural Jamaica, a daughter of South St. James, raised in communities where culture was not something carefully packaged and occasionally consumed, but something we lived every single day. We heard it in the churches, how we clap, how we dance, how we sing. We heard it in our music. We heard it in the marketplaces. We heard it in the sound systems drifting across districts at evening time. In the cadence of our elders' storytelling, in our revival meetings, in our zinc fence conversations, in the humor and resilience of ordinary Jamaican people. Before I ever studied communication academically at the London School of Economics, I experienced communication culturally. Before I ever understood branding professionally, I understood identity instinctively. And perhaps that is why I approach this portfolio with a deep conviction that culture is far more than your entertainment. Culture shapes how our people see themselves. Culture determines whether a nation walks with confidence or with insecurity. Culture influences how the world sees us and how we see ourselves. Culture carries memory, it carries resistance, it carries aspiration, and it carries opportunity. Yet too often in Jamaica, Culture is still treated as an ornamental, as though it is merely something to entertain us after the serious business of nation building is complete. But culture is not separate from development. It builds economies. It builds economies. It builds tourism, builds social cohesion, it builds confidence. It builds diplomacy and global influence. And just like roads, schools, ports, and digital systems, culture requires investment. It requires maintenance, systems, and vision. A country that neglects the cultural infrastructure eventually weakens its national confidence.
Such excellent points raised by Nikisha Burchell. Now, of course, the Speaker of the House does have to adhere to the rules of Parliament, so let us not beat her too badly on this. At the end of the day, she is simply following the rules and making sure that these archaic rules manifest throughout the ceremonial procedure. Now, I don't appreciate that these rules still exist. I do believe they are outdated, colonial, and typical of the imperial culture that we mimic from the British. And it is full time that many of these procedures are revamped to suit our culture and our nation and represent our identity at its fullest. Now, of course, it isn't expected that all of the parliamentary speeches are done in Patwah. No, we are an English speaking nation, but Patwah is our national language, which we ought to embrace. And within the context that Nikisha Burchell used it, it was about subversion of power and also about subversion of marginalizing when it comes to culture. People see culture as something that is for the popular, the masses, and not for the elite, and not for the serious matters that are being discussed in Parliament. They do not see it as an expression of identity, but in fact as something counterproductive to the business of running the country. So I genuinely believe that Nikisha knew that she was going to get shut down because she's fully aware of what the rules are in Parliament. And she did this on purpose to drive home her point about the way in which we put culture on the periphery of the core processes of socio-economical development within our country, as though it is an add-on and not an integral part of who we are. She emphasizes that culture is very much a global branding of Jamaica and allows us to meander through corridors of power through our influence. And the influence is quintessentially about our culture. Indeed, culture has opened up for Jamaicans on a global stage. Many forms of access, accolades, and attributions that are well deserved based on the power of influence that our culture has. Oftentimes, you will be far away from your home island, and people will recognize Jamaica as identifying with Bob Marley, Usain Bolt, Vibes Cartel, and holistically reggae music or dancehall. There is going to be some recognition of our culture before even a recognition of who we are as a people. Before anyone gets to know you, they are saying things like one love, wagwan, and even the famous Jamaican bad word, bomboclat. Yes, it is something that precedes us. Sometimes many people don't like it, but I saw it go. At the end of the day, it is what people recognize about Jamaica and often celebrates in their love for the island and its people. So, should we sweep these things under the carpet or stick them out by the front door while we carry on with serious business? No. It ought to be an integral part of how we express ourselves, even when discussing how to run our country. I remember when I was at the University of the West Indies, and one of the pioneers of the use of our language was Professor Caroline Cooper. Now, she to me was revolutionary in her presentation style in the UWI lecture theatres. That woman would incorporate cloths and fabrics in her discussions in such a way that it was mesmerizing, yes, and highly intellectual as well. Jamaican culture has definitely been on the lips of many of our icons in the island recently, including Fae Ellington. Yes, Fae Ellington. Auntie Fae, big up your nice, clean self. Now, Fae Ellington had this to say about the use of Gully in the dance hall. I want you to listen to this little clip of Fae Ellington's perspective on why it is that Gully Ride and other folklore songs should be left alone.
Veteran broadcaster and cultural commentator Fae Ellington is raising concerns about explicit lyrics being placed on the popular hill and gully rhythm, warning that the trend risks undermining Jamaica's cultural heritage. Miss Ellington praised the producer Stephen McGregor for reviving the traditional folk-inspired rhythm, but says some artists have used it in ways she describes as disrespectful and overly crass.
And I have no problem with what Stephen did in terms of turning that rhythm to us now in present-day Jamaica, but Lord of mercy, the nastiness that some of the people who decide to put lyrics on it have done. Yes, the desecration bothers me, because if you don't understand your history, then you will understand where you're coming from. And when you look at what Stephen McGregor has done, the genius, that's brilliance. To have taken our folk music and repositioned it, but you gone upon it with your nastiness. Dance.
She says Jamaican folk music carries deep historical and cultural meaning, arguing that many young people have failed to connect with the roots of the music they consume.
How many of our young people visit the Institute of Jamaica? How many of our young people go to see the Jamaican folk singers when they perform, or the Carry folk singers, or the Hatfield singers? And nobody tell me say that nobody not. It's out there. You just have not made yourself available to find it and associate with it. And you have recordings of these things. Some of them are on YouTube too, and Uncle Nasness, they're all over a place. So find them. When you speak about women in a particular way, and that's the only way you can address the woman and her womanhood, you know that's something wrong with you and something wrong with that woman to accept it. And I know that a lot of women accept that kind of treatment. They are the ones railing in at the dance hall.
She's also calling on artists, politicians, corporate Jamaica, churches and educators to play a greater role in promoting positive cultural values.
We all have to ask ourselves, what is a Jamaica that we want? What do we want it to represent? Is it just gun lyrics? Is it just underwoman skirt lyrics? Is it just gutter lyrics? And nobody tell me say it sell. Nobody tell me that. And both I saw the thing set. Then we just go set so till thy kingdom come.
So does our amazing Auntie Fae have a point? Of course she does. She does. I get exactly where she's coming from. And yes, I can see the need and the drive to preserve the culture and to bring the cultural history along with the origins of the music. All of that makes perfect sense if you're sat in a lecture theatre. If you are in an environment where such discussions can take place. If it's about spreading that awareness through the media, I am all for it. However, you really and truly cannot expect the artists, the perpetuators of the lyrics and the music, to carry that history every single time they do a performance. No. I came across this fantastic article. I'm going to share a bit of it. It's rather long, but I'm going to share a bit of it with you because I really love this article. It was written by someone by the name of Richard Hugh Blackford, published on the 13th of May on Jamaicans.com. The title of it is Hill and Gully Ride, Why This Rhythm's Revival is Actually a Win for Jamaican Culture. It says, veteran Jamaican broadcaster Fae Ellington, Auntie Fae, has publicly expressed discomfort with the modern use of the Hill and Gully Ride rhythm, particularly the sexually explicit dancehall songs now dominating social media and streaming platforms through its sampling. It would be dishonest of me if I suggested that her concern wasn't understandable. After all, Hill and Gully Ride is not merely another catchy melody. It is one of Jamaica's treasured folk standards, a song that is tied not only to the island's musical history, identity, but also its cultural memory. As a result, hearing it transformed into modern dancehall content can understandably jar members of an older generation who grew up seeing folk music as something almost sacred. But while I love Auntie Fae considerably and respect her immense contribution to Jamaican broadcasting and culture, I believe this moment exposes something else entirely, beginning perhaps with a lack of understanding about how today's music industry actually works, an observation that ironically opens the doors to another argument for greater cultural education. It appears to me that what many critics are missing is that the current explosion around the Hill and Gully Ride is not cultural death but the rhythm's cultural regeneration, a feature of today's music ecosystem, where sampling an older song or rhythm is often the very thing that breathes new commercial and cultural life into it. Younger audiences who may never have heard the original melody are suddenly searching for it, discussing it, remixing it, and rediscovering Jamaica's folk traditions through modern interpretation. This is a fact that matters because culture survives not by being frozen in glass cases or reams of archives, but by remaining alive enough to be reused, reimagined, and reintroduced to new generations. The simple truth is that if nobody touches the music dies. And the article carries on. It is a brilliantly written piece, one that I agree with wholeheartedly. Now, I can totally see where Auntie Fae is coming from, because honestly, the lyrics that have to do with women and their body parts, they're extremely lewd, extremely vulgar. This isn't new in dancehall. In fact, that is part and parcel of what dancehall music is all about. However, what I find is that I am seeing young influencers, TikTokers, popular characters doing these dances that normally they would not have done. I am seeing them dip into the culture of Pocomania, revivalist dances, things that have deep-rooted connections with our ancestral heritage. I am seeing them reflect on their Pan-African culture in a way that normally they would never do. Usually when it comes down to music and slackness, the movements and gyrations match the lyrics. This is a situation where I am seeing people doing cultural dances, dinky mini and all them something there, broke up and all them something there, which they never normally would have done. They would not have even recognized it as something that they can do within dance hall. That is a refreshing of our culture in itself. That is a holding on to the remnants of it, because honestly, without something like this taking place in the dance hall spaces, the younger generation would have no reason to collude with that part of our culture. They wouldn't have a reason to unless they're going out of their way to join some kind of dance group where they are delving into the cultural past. They would have no reason to do this. And just by the opportunity that lends itself for past and present to merge together, you end up with a beautiful synchronized understanding of where our dances came from and lyrics to match the current taste. Now, the lyrics will not be something that Auntie Fae would celebrate, and she is perfectly right. I have a problem with a lot of the dancehall lyrics and how women are portrayed in those lyrics. But at the end of the day, if you were to really be honest about it, Pocomania, the folk music and the dances that go with it were often looked down upon by the upper and middle classes of Jamaica. Back in the day, it would be considered something associated with rural Jamaica and the poor. So many uptown and many rich people never into that kind of music until it became almost like a exotic thing that they wanted to hold on to in order to say that we are remembering our past. Remember, classism has always existed in our island, and it has always been pro-white, pro-Western cultures and against African and all of its interpretations. expect that you are going to see the same reaction back in the day when Kumina, Junkuno, Brookings, Revival and Quadrille were being done by the masses. Their attitude towards it was definitely one of cultural snobbery, and it was something that would have been considered of a lower class if you were participating in those things. Eventually, it became wider accepted. It became something that was looked on as culturally wholesome and representative of who we are. Remember, there was also a time when reggae music was looked down on. Rastafarians were looked down on. And now, this is the time that dancehall is looked down on by the who's who of society. And unfortunately, Auntie Fae, whether you want to admit it or not, you are a part of the elite. Yes, you are. And it is almost expected that you will find the lyrics that are being sung to these songs offensive. But does that negate your point? That the lyrics needs to be of a higher standard? No, it doesn't. It does not. But you have to realize that the acceptance of it, the love of it, will be where it is appropriate. The masses will enjoy this music because this is part and parcel with their socioeconomical status and where the origins of dancehall lies. It is also where the origins of roots music lies. So Hill and Gully Ride came from the poor, the people who were traveling in buses and by foot up and down the hills and the valleys in order to farm and to make a living. Right? So at the end of the day, if the poor chooses to take this music and subvert it into dancehall, which is also poor people music, and turn it into something new, guess what, Auntie Fae? You don't have a right to tell them not to do it. Because it was never from your class and creed that this music came from in the first place. Anyway, if you have made it this far into the video, don't forget to hit the like, share and subscribe button. And of course, click that bell if you are new to my channel. So every time I drop a video, you are notified. This is your girl, Head Teacher K, and I'm out.